I know the word. I can see it. I can almost feel it, sitting right there, just behind my tongue, just behind the moment I need it. And then I open my mouth, and what comes out is wrong. Slow, broken, nothing like what was in my head. But here's what's strange. When I type the words come, clean sentences, correct grammar, ideas that actually sound like what I meant. So the English is there. It's inside me somewhere. My brain has it. I just can't seem to access it when I'm speaking. And for a long time, I thought that meant I wasn't good enough. I was wrong about what was actually happening. Here's the question nobody asks. Why does a language feel fluent in your head and fall apart the moment you try to speak it out loud? Why can you understand a movie in English perfectly, follow every joke, catch every reference, and then struggle to form one clean sentence when someone asks you a question? This isn't a language problem. This is a neuroscience problem, and the answer changes how you see yourself entirely. In the 1860s, a French physician named Paul Broca was studying patients who had lost the ability to speak after brain injuries. These patients could understand language perfectly. They knew what they wanted to say. They could nod when you said the right thing. They could write in some cases, but they could not produce spoken language. Broca discovered that a specific region of the brain, now called Broca's area, located in the left frontal lobe, was damaged in every one of these patients. This was the first scientific evidence that language in the brain is not one thing. It is multiple systems, separate but connected. Understanding language, producing language, reading, writing, speaking. All of them use overlapping but distinct neural pathways, which means you can be advanced in one and genuinely underdeveloped in another. Your brain's English and your mouth's English are not the same system. Here's where it gets specific. Language researchers distinguish between two types of knowledge. The first is called receptive language, the ability to understand, reading, listening, following meaning. The second is called productive language, the ability to generate, speaking, writing, forming output. Research consistently shows that receptive ability develops faster and reaches higher levels than productive ability, especially in second language learners. Ellen Balastock, a cognitive psychologist at York University in Canada, who has spent decades studying bilingualism and language acquisition, found that exposure to a language through reading, listening, consuming content builds receptive competence significantly faster than it builds the ability to produce that language fluently under pressure. You absorbed the English, you watched it, read it, consumed it for years. But production is a different muscle, and that muscle only develops through one thing: actual use. Uncomfortable, imperfect, real use. Pattern interrupt. Because there's another layer here that most language explanations skip entirely. It's not just about which neural systems are developed. It's about what happens to those systems under pressure. In 1908, psychologists Robert Yerkes and John Dodson, working at Harvard University, described what is now called the Yerkes-Dodson law, the relationship between arousal and performance. Their research showed that performance on complex tasks follows an inverted U shape. Too little pressure, and you're disengaged. Too much pressure, and performance collapses. Speaking a second language in real time is a high-complexity task. It requires retrieving vocabulary, applying grammar rules, monitoring pronunciation, tracking the conversation, formulating a response, all simultaneously. When anxiety is added to that, when there's someone watching, when you're afraid of making mistakes, when you care about how you sound, the arousal level spikes past the optimal point, and the system that was working fine inside your head, in silence, without stakes, breaks down under the pressure of actually being watched. This is why your English feels better when you're alone, when you're writing, when the stakes feel low. It's not that you know less. It's that anxiety is actively interfering with retrieval. There's a name for this in second language research. Stephen Krashan, a linguist at the University of Southern California, developed what he called the Affective Filter Hypothesis as part of his broader input hypothesis framework in the 1980s. The idea is this: emotional factors like anxiety, low confidence, and fear of judgment act as a filter that blocks language from being produced fluently, even when the underlying knowledge is there. High effective filter, the knowledge is blocked. The words don't come, the sentences fall apart. Low effective filter, the knowledge flows. The language feels accessible. This is why some people speak a second language much better after one drink. Not because alcohol improves language ability, because it temporarily lowers the effective filter, the anxiety, the self-monitoring, the fear of sounding wrong. The English was there the whole time. The filter was in the way. Here's the part that stays with me. You've spent years consuming English, movies, music, YouTube videos, books, conversations. You built a vast receptive system, a library of language inside your head that is genuinely sophisticated. but you were never really forced to produce it under pressure, to speak it imperfectly in front of someone, and keep going anyway. So the gap exists, not because you're deficient, but because you developed one system without equally developing the other. And every time you tried to speak, and it fell apart, you interpreted that as evidence that you weren't good enough, that your English wasn't real, that the fluency you felt internally was somehow fake. It wasn't fake. It was just housed in a system that hadn't been trained for the conditions you were putting it in. Meryl Swain, a linguist at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, spent years researching what actually moves people from receptive to productive fluency. Her conclusion, which she called the output hypothesis, was direct. Comprehensible input alone is not enough. You have to produce language to develop the ability to produce language. Output forces you to notice gaps between what you know and what you can actually access under pressure. It pushes the system to develop in ways that passive exposure never will. There is no shortcut past the discomfort of speaking badly for a while. The brain builds the production system only when you actually force it to produce imperfectly, publicly, repeatedly. Here's what the stakes actually are. Every time you stay silent because you're afraid of sounding wrong, you are protecting a fluency that will never develop unless you risk sounding wrong. The internal English will stay internal. The gap will stay exactly where it is. The people who become fluent speakers of a second language are not the people who had perfect grammar from the start. They are the people who spoke badly for long enough, consistently enough, that the production system had no choice but to develop. The discomfort isn't a sign that something is wrong. It is the process. My brain can speak English better than I can. That was true. But what I didn't understand was, my brain and my mouth are different systems, and the gate between them closes only one way. Not by knowing more, by speaking more, imperfectly, out loud, in front of people. Past the point where it's comfortable, the English is already there. The only thing left is to stop protecting it from the moment it needs to actually be used. Asterisk, thanks for watching.